So I will let Jordan finally introduce himself. We might have everything going. He will never, ever come back again. He will blame Jennifer for sending him because of this. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Hey guys, my name is Jordan Browning. I'm the Community Partnerships and Advocacy Coordinator at Ozarks Food Harvest. So basically what that means is I attend all of the meetings that involve any kind of food-related services that take place within Southwest Missouri. And I also keep track of any kind of legislation that may affect what we do. So that's going to usually be federal nutrition programs, things like that. And then I will communicate that to our legislators to kind of let them know how that's going to affect their constituents that live within their area. So that can be people like Senator Roy Blunt, Senator Claire McCaskill, some of the House representatives, just keeping them aware of how federal nutrition policy is going to end up affecting those people that they serve. So today we're just going to go over some general things about Ozarks Food Harvest, the general food bank things, and different programs we offer. There's not a lot of you, so we can keep it pretty general. Just shout out a question. Please don't throw anything. My face is delicate. But we'll just go over some basic stuff. This is also the newest thing I've seen, that I can touch a screen like this.
Amazing.
I know, it feels really strange to be doing this. It makes me feel so futuristic. So we are a member of Feeding America. So that's our large national conglomerate organization. So that is made up of 200 food banks with 60,000 pantries as part of those food banks. We're serving about 46 million people per year. So no matter where you are in the entirety of the 50 United States, there's going to be a food bank covering that service area. So that even includes Hawaii, that includes Alaska, where food has to be helicoptered into certain sections of that state, and even includes Puerto Rico right now, where it has to be boated into certain parts of the state. So no matter what, you're always going to be covered by a food bank. So you can see here within the state of Missouri, we have 6 different food banks. So this is Ozarks Food Harvest Service Area right here in the Southwest Missouri section. You also have Harvesters that covers some of Missouri, that covers some of the Kansas side as well. You have Second Harvest, Central and Northeast Missouri, St. Louis Area Food Bank, and Southeast Missouri Food Bank. So in general, they kind of operate in similar ways. We have similar programs. It just kind of depends on the area that we're serving. So for example, in St. Louis, they're going to be serving a lot more citywide communities, things like that, as opposed to in Southwest Missouri, a lot more of our pantries and people that we're serving are in a lot more rural areas that are more difficult to get to. So just some example of some of the places we serve: Springfield, Joplin, Carthage, West Plains, Branson, Monette. One of the questions I got earlier, which was really good, is like, what differs us from somebody like Convoy of Hope? So Convoy of Hope, they're very globally and like disaster relief focused. So for example, those things going on in Puerto Rico right now, that's being covered by places like Convoy of Hope, as opposed to we are just specifically focused within the Southwest Missouri area. But if something like the Joplin tornado happened, which was a few years back, we absolutely handle that situation as well and work with government organizations to get food and relief to there as well. This is a picture of our facility. We are off of East Kearney. We are previously just 46,000 square feet, but we just finished building our additional warehouse that's another 46,000 square feet to get us even more cooler and freezer space. So what we primarily operate as is a food warehouse. So we don't do any actual direct food service to anyone that comes to our agency. The reason we do this is because we can store this amount of food and purchase that at a much lower price that can then be distributed out to agencies at a much better rate. So as you can see here, this is easily confused all the time, so it's perfectly fine if that's happened to you before. Is the difference between a food bank and a food pantry. So there's only one food bank in Southwest Missouri, so we serve about 270 agencies across our 28 county service area. And so a food pantry is typically going to be providing just those food and supplies directly to the client, and they're usually only going to serve one county. And you're going to see a lot more difference from food pantry to food pantry on as far as size, how many people they serve, what kind of food they serve. It just kind of depends on what their needs are. Oh. So this is just an example of kind of a size difference that you're going to see here. As far as we're just a large warehousing facility, this is usually a lot more small scale type facility. So as far as the impact of what we can do with that warehousing space is we're feeding about 30,000 people each week, and we can take $1 worth of donations and turn that into $10 worth of food and services, which equals up to about 17 million meals that we get to provide each and every year. So also one of the things we like to talk about is sometimes that it can be with nonprofits is it can be seen as that we are not professional or that we don't have a very specific business aspect focus, but we were actually rated with a 100% rating from Charity Navigator, which looks at financial strength, accountability, and transparency. That's because not only do we take very seriously all of the guidelines that help our organization, but 96 cents out of every dollar goes directly towards programs, and only 4 cents out of every dollar is going to administrative expenses. So one of the things I also wanted to point out is you're going to probably hear me say a lot the word food insecurity. So what I'm referring to when I say that is the lack of access to enough food for an active lifestyle, as opposed to poverty, which means a complete lack of economic resources. So it can be a difference here as far as so in poverty, you could have just a complete lack of financial resources for a car, for a home, for anything. As opposed to food insecurity, you could potentially have a job, you could have a home, you could have a car, but you still don't have enough resources to get enough food at the end of the month for you and your family. So that's kind of what I'm talking about when I talk about things like very low food insecurity areas and things like that. Just skip past that. So this is one I like to break down as far as to let you know kind of where Missouri stands among the other United States. So we are currently ranked 7th for highest food insecurity rate and the 2nd highest prevalence of very low food insecurity. So roughly about 15.3% of the Southwest Missouri population is food insecure, which is roughly about 170,000 people. And half of those are households with children and seniors. So this is kind of what I'm talking about here is the food insecurity is that they're having to the majority of people are choosing between food and utilities, or in the case of seniors, they're choosing between food and medicine. So to give you a breakdown as far as even with Missouri is that you can see it's a pretty consistently around 15 to 16% food insecurity rate. But then you can see here as far as child food insecurity rate is it gets even higher. So just within Springfield, it's estimated that about 6,000 kids are going to bed hungry every night. So what are the causes of food insecurity? So it's not a simple answer to that. It's usually a very multi-factored thing that's going into why this is caused. So unemployment is a major cause. So even though our unemployment rates may be going down, what we're seeing is those jobs that did come back from unemployment are now part-time jobs that were once full-time jobs, and they're still not going to be able to cover that gap that people have. Another is price surges. Food, utilities, other daily staples are continuing to go up. Slow economic growth, even though we are currently coming out of the recession, it's still very difficult for people to get it back on their feet. And that personal debt is the highest in U.S. history. So this is a slide I really like to talk about because what we encounter a lot with problems, not only with just the clients we serve, but any kind of clients that may access federal nutrition programs, predominantly something like food stamps or welfare, it can often be misconstrued on what does that person look like. Because typically, I'm sure everyone's heard that, you know, if you buy food stamps, you're getting steak and lobster and you're living large on that amount of funding you're getting each week. But typically, the people we're seeing that are accessing these programs are going to be ages 30 to 49, typically going to be Caucasian within Missouri. 2 to 3 members in the household. Majority of the time, it's a single parent household with 2 to 3 kids. They're renting or leasing a home, high school diploma, so they have education. The problem is their income is less than $10,000 per year because they may be doing part-time work that was once full-time work. And most of their children are participating in the National School Lunch Program as well. So that's getting them covered as far as during the day, but not necessarily at night. And then as we talked about before, the big problem is that people are having to choose between so many different things. Even though they may have access to financial resources, it becomes a have to pick and choose each month what you get. The biggest problem that we see, though, is that even though there are a lot of services available out there, is that you're going to expend a great deal of effort trying to get all of those coordinated at once. So a large part of what my job is, too, is helping people get assistance with food stamps. But the problem that you'll see very easily is like, okay, so you're going to sign up for a food stamp program. You also have to make sure that you get your kids signed up for the National School Lunch Program. You may also need to sign up for Medicaid. May need to sign up for 2 other programs, insurance, and then this all becomes 8 different kinds of paperwork that could easily confuse anyone. So that's the biggest issue we see too, is why people may not access all the services that are available to them is because it's so hard to compound those all together.
I have a question, real quick, clarifying question.
Yeah.
So, all of those can be, though, interdependent of each other, right? I mean, you could have Medicaid, but not food stamps. You could
Correct.
have food stamps or be SNAP, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And not on Medicaid, because it's all based on
Right.
the number of people in your family and whatever percentage of
Mhm.
poverty that, okay.
Yeah.
And then I was also told something else. I want to insert the SNAP, because I didn't know this, but SNAP is part of the USDA,
Yes.
okay, which I didn't know.
Mhm.
And that if you know people that need food stamps, SNAP, sorry, I'm old.
No, it's
SNAP.
every single person says food stamps in Missouri, even the staff, yeah.
That if people don't utilize that, those that need it don't utilize it, then the funding gets cut to the state. You know what I'm saying?
It doesn't necessarily get cut, but that is funding that the state will not receive.
Right. So if you,
Yes.
it's kind of like a grant. If you don't use it, you lose it. So
Correct. Yeah.
there are a lot of people out there that are too proud, maybe, I don't know if that's the word, but don't want food stamps.
No, it's
to
absolutely
qualify.
true.
But
Yeah.
if they qualify and you can get them on it, I mean, it's a win-win situation, because first of all, they got food for themselves and their kids' bellies. And second of all, it keeps that door open,
Mhm.
you know, so that there's continued funding.
Yes, absolutely.
And I did not know that.
Yeah.
Is that because they look at it and say, oh, X amount was used, so we're not gonna give
Right,
that much
right,
to it, we're
right,
gonna move it
right.
over here?
Well, so it's kind of complicated with that. So with the amount, so that's a totally great topic. Just because, yeah, a lot of people will go and say, hey, you need to apply for food stamps, and they say, well, I don't want to take away from someone else or a family, a child, a senior, anything like that. And we have to say, you're not taking away from anyone else, because anyone who is eligible to receive funding from the program will receive, money from that said program. So the problem is not necessarily that it would be cut, or they're going to look at the budget and say like, oh, we don't need this amount of funding in it, because it's got a very flexible budget. So I don't have the slides in here today, but basically you can see, like, as the economy kind of crashed with the recession, is food stamp applications went up, and the amount of people that went on the program went up as well. But then as we started to come out of the recession, it started to go down as well. So the really great thing about it is it serves as a very flexible program to be able to adapt to those economic problems. But what you're going to see in certain programs, like welfare, for example, it's called TANF now. So you may have heard of this thing that's been reported in the news called block granting. So basically what that means is the United States federal government would say, okay, state of Missouri, you get $15 million for said program. And once you run out of that money, you're on your own. You got to figure it out. And then the state can figure out how to allocate that. So generally the weakness of something like that is then when the state can choose how it's doled out, then it can actually happen. As far as if you're eligible, there may not be any money left for that. So that can be kind of the nuanced thing of how funding works for federal nutrition programs. But I'll probably talk a little bit about that as we go on too. So with our distribution amounts, you guys can see here from like 2008 into 2017, we've been able to increase from 4.5 million pounds per year to 17 million pounds, with roughly a value of about $31 million for the amount of distribution we're doing. Hopefully with our new warehouse, we'll be able to double this amount, because we're still dealing with record high food insecurity rates all across Southwest Missouri. And then this gives you a breakdown of kind of our distribution resources. So you can see here as far as the amount that is donated to us. And I'll talk a little bit about where that product comes from later. And then we've got our purchased product, which is what we'll directly purchase to store in our warehouse. Federal commodities, so that will come from the USDA, from things like TFAP. And then we have produce, which simultaneously kind of comes from donated, and then some of that comes from local donations from gardens. And then we also operate our own garden from Ozarks Food Harvest that we will utilize to give out to agencies as well. So some of our food sources here, you can see it is all across the spectrum as far as Kraft, General Mills, Smart Chicken, Tyson, Walmart. All of these sources are really great things for not only getting food to our warehouse, but then food that we can give out to our agencies.
Oh, can we go back for just a minute?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm sorry, because
No,
I'm not
you're
paying
fine.
close attention, but I would point out that like Tyson, Smart Chicken,
Mhm.
probably Cargill, I don't know, Conac, requires refrigeration.
Mhm.
And so you have,
Yeah, so about 50% of our square footage is made up by refrigeration and freezer units, so that way we can keep that kind of stuff on hand. Because yeah, a lot of the problems with agencies is they simply can't afford large refrigeration units, so they're forced to purchase smaller items just by the necessity of the pantries they're operating. Yeah, so that's definitely the strength of having our large warehousing unit to give out to more agencies across Southwest Missouri. So some of our distribution services, a lot of you guys have probably heard of the weekend backpack program. So that's just the program where we provide a backpack worth of food to a child so that way they have a meal each day, so that way they can come back to school on Monday and not be completely hungry. We've also got the mobile food pantry. So that's, for example, what I was talking about earlier is we've got a lot of cities within South Missouri that are very rural. So it can be difficult for a grocery store to even be there, much less a food pantry. So what we'll do is we will load up one of our trucks with food and necessities, and then we can do a direct distribution at whatever site is most convenient for that population. So we've also got our after-school feeding and summer sites. The after-school feeding sites are also helped out by federal, like USDA type grants and things like that to help cover those children who may not be able to access any kind of dinner at home. The summer sites are one of those really important ones because a lot of times when kids exit out of school, they have that 3-month gap between going back to school for the next semester that they are no longer getting any kind of food services from breakfast or lunch programs that would be offered through their school. So that's a way of covering those children that may be still qualified for those services. We also have our senior box program that is just specifically tailored towards seniors over the age of 60. We just package that food, also another USDA program, with stuff that just may be missing from their diet, high protein items, high fiber items, things like that. And then we also do SNAP outreach or food stamp outreach. And that's just trying to increase the amount of people that are qualified for the program to get them on the program. So the really big benefit of that is we get more people on the food stamp program. That takes off a lot of pressure that we have on food pantry areas. And I've got a cool little graph, I can't remember where it's coming up, to kind of show you the difference in federal programs. But one of the biggest ones for SNAP is just the overall effect that it can have on the entire community. So not only is it allowing people to exactly decide what kind of food that they're going to purchase for themselves and their families, but think of it like this as far as, so right now there's roughly about $1 billion per year coming in of people spending food stamp dollars in Missouri. So not only is that helping out those people that can't afford food, but then that's being purchased at a local grocery store, serving as a stimulus there. So that's paying the workers, that's paying the truck drivers, that's paying the farmers. So it's a great all-around program of going straight back into the economy. So for example, in some communities, like, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but one of our more rural cities, you may have a grocery store that wouldn't operate without the food stamp program being there. So like they may be driving up to 80% of their profits from food stamp benefits, which is actually can be a good thing, because if food stamp dollars weren't being purchased there, that grocery store has no reason to stay. So then you get a thing called the food desert, which means someone may have to drive up to 45 minutes to an hour to be able to access any kind of grocery services. So it's one of those things of a little nuanced problem that can come out of food stamp dollars being cut or completely taken away. So this is the chart I was telling you guys about. So Ozarks Food Harvest, we're the biggest food distributor in Southwest Missouri. So just to give you an idea in Greene County, we're doing about $6 million worth of food distribution annually. Federal food assistance is doing about $80 million annually. And the bulk of that is made up of the food stamp program. So if that food program were to be cut or just taken away completely, nobody's going to be there to cover that amount of food that would go missing. So that's why it's a really vital, important thing that we have to talk about these issues, because even though we're here to fill in the gap where these programs may fall in between, this is an absolute necessity to make sure people don't go hungry in Southwest Missouri. And the way we kind of measure this is through our Map the Meal Gap program. So what this does is it's just measuring how people fall within a certain percentage of poverty guideline. And so as you can see here, it's got food insecurity rate is 15.6. And then we kind of calculate the average meal cost, just to kind of give a rough rule of thumb of how much it would take to take care of the food insecurity problem, which is estimated to be about $2.73 within Missouri, which leaves about a $464 billion food budget shortfall. But the good news with that is even though that is a very large number, if we could get the amount of people that would be qualified for food stamps onto those type of programs, along with the food assistance provided by food banks, that could eliminate the problem of food insecurity like that. So some different ways, if you guys are looking to plug anyone into these different kind of services, you can find all of our distribution sites at ozarksfoodharvest.org. Spread out across our 28 county service area. We'll talk about feeding sites, pantries, backpack programs, anything like that. And also encouraging anyone who may be interested, even if they don't think they would be eligible for some reason, is just to talk with one of our OFH SNAP coordinators that they can get them at least set up with the program. And if not that, they can get them set up to get food pantry access. So along with that, we can also, we accept donations of money that we can provide $10 worth of food and services from $1 donation. You can also donate food to raise meals and awareness about food insecurity in Southwest Missouri. And you can also donate your time of 1 hour provides roughly about 100 plus meals.
Did you talk about the number of paid positions? Jennifer always brings that up. I just find that an amazing thing for such a huge facility. How many paid positions are there?
We're sitting roughly at about 50 paid employees right now. So with our volunteers, it would take roughly, I believe the number is 20 full-time employees to make up for that process.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. And it's the doubly amazing the percentage of the dollar that you guys keep.
Yeah.
Just to run your daily 4 cents out of every dollar just doesn't seem like very much to run the transportation, the ins and the outs. And
yeah, absolutely.
Overhead,
yeah, and we just do that to make sure as much as possible that when a donor comes to us that they can be sure that it is as high quality of a place that they can donate to as possible.
Right.
Red Cross keep a higher percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the other thing, if you go back to the other slide, the other thing that I think is very impressive, but while it's fun, and we did it when I was a teacher, having food drives, canned food drives, and all that kind of stuff. Well, it is, but you get more bang for your buck if you just donate money, because then they can buy in such huge quantities that, you know, you buy 2 cans, the best choice for $1 maybe, you know what I'm saying? But that $1 goes for $10 worth, so.
Yeah, and that's a misconception that you'll sometimes hear get promoted around. It'll come up every few months or so as somebody will say, well, don't donate to Ozarks Food Harvest, donate it to your local pantry. They're gonna directly purchase that food. And it's like, technically, yes, they will directly purchase food, but they're gonna be able to stretch that dollar much better if it was going through our organization.
Because you're doing it in bulk and truckloads versus.
Yeah, and so that's trying the thing we always try and get around to. It's just plugging people into services that already exist. Because sometimes you'll even see, especially within Springfield, I think we have, we're in like the top 5 of nonprofits spread it, like the amount of nonprofits within a city. Is just trying to hook people in with services because so many people are trying to reinvent the wheel of thinking, oh, I want to help people with food distribution services. And they don't do the research to see, oh, wow, there's already like 30 food pantries just within Greene County alone that are being helped out by Ozarks Food Harvest, towards like just plug people into those services and it would take, the problem will take care of itself. But yeah, that's about it for my presentation.
Okay.
Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, my remote people, do you have any questions? Did you have some handouts? Because
yes, I handed out some.
Okay, I will scan one to everybody. I have people from all over the state. So those of you that are remote, are you familiar with your large organizational food harvest, kind of thing in your area? If not, I think you can go to your website and it will show the different ones across the state. So how far over do you go? I have people over at Eminence. Van Buren, do you guys go that far? Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, we go pretty far out east, but then once you get to a certain point, I can't remember the exact county cutoff, then it
Yeah,
turns into
okay.
Southeast Missouri Food
Okay,
Bank service
okay.
area.
So, but then I've got people way north, so you guys will be in a different, but I kind of thought
Mhm.
you guys go really pretty far east.
Yes,
so,
yeah, we cover a pretty large service area, but yes, so much of it is rural and spread out. Yeah, so we're a lot different from like St. Louis area.
Right.
They're still maybe serving the same amount, but they're in a much smaller service area just due to their population density.
And then I have a specific question about the backpack program, because when I'm not doing this, I substitute some at Rogersville in the school nurse's office. And so, I mean, they have the backpack program. So do they, is there more than one way that schools do that? I mean, do they just like send an order into you and you deliver that to them and then they pack their own bags? Do you pack the bags and send them out to schools? How does that work?
So we have a backpack coordinator who directly oversees all of them. And so usually what we'll do is we'll sit down to have a conversation with the school of, okay, how many students do you think fall within these guidelines? Because it's not as usually hard and fast as some of our federal programs, because the weekend backpack is a completely private program. So we'll discuss with them, how many people do you think we need? And then we'll send them that amount. And then as they're distributing that to children, we'll see, okay, do we need to adjust? Does there need to be fewer? Does there need to be more? But all of that food will be packaged on an Ozarks Food Harvest site. Just once again, because we're ordering all of that food in bulk anyway, we have the volunteers there to do that. And then we'll distribute that out to the different schools to be distributed about every Friday.
How many school districts do you do that for?
I'm trying to recall, as far as just within the Greene County area, I know we have about 58 different schools.
Wow.
And then it just kind of differs as we
asking,
go further out.
we sustain our own backpack program. We don't have a big contributor to it. So our school district pretty much does it on its own through grants and local grants. We send home about 286 backpacks a week, and
That's awesome.
do it pretty much ourselves. Yeah.
We
need money.
Yeah. Well, what county are you guys operating in?
We're in Miller County.
Okay.
Just about a half hour from Cole County.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, you guys might reach out to the food bank there to see what kind of services they may be able to provide you guys.
Yeah. Okay.
Is there a criteria that has to be met? Like, how do you determine the need for the school program per child?
So if I'm remembering correctly, we will usually look at the rates of children that are receiving free and reduced lunch. And I believe if it falls over a certain threshold, then we'll enter that school to receive some kind of backpack.
So if they've already got some sort of program in there for that.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's some schools here in Springfield that other sites will just come in and do their own backpack program, which is totally fine. But we try and avoid doubling up on services of somebody that's already operating there, just to make sure that we're getting as many children as possible.
And then, I'm trying to think, I have a lot of different people come in, but you were talking about like after-school feedings, if you will, for lack of a better term. So those would be like the Boys and Girls Club.
Correct.
Do some schools still have maybe like after-school tutoring evenings and things where parents and students can come and have a meal provided here in Springfield?
Absolutely.
Like Fairbanks.
Yes, it's a zone, it's part of the Zone 1 Blitz thing, but I think that, that if I lived in Zone 2 or whoever was close to Zone 1, I might be getting a little tired of it, Zone 1 getting everything. But I think that, if you're in a different zone, I mean, I don't see why you guys, remember your representatives, those kind, but it doesn't just always have to be there, but it's a nice, it's a nice program. And then the summer school, the summer feedings, if you will, everybody knows that a kid can go to any school during summer school hours and get breakfast and lunch for free. Whether they're going to summer school or not.
Correct.
They
Yes.
can walk in and get a meal.
There's also like the Salvation Army, they do a summer day camp. And so, but they're on the food program, supplemental food program, and that as long as there is a child, the entire family can come.
I don't know, remote people, if you can hear me very well or not, but you do realize, I'll repeat it, that any child during the summer can go to a public school that's in session for summer school and get breakfast and lunch for free.
What type of items are in the backpack program?
As far as I can remember, usually they're going to be just single serve items that way they don't need to be heated up or refrigerated, so the child can store them wherever they need to be. So typically it's going to be a milk item, 2 breakfast items, 2 lunch items. Actually, I'm sorry, probably 3 lunch items, 3 breakfast items, 3 dinner items. And they rotate. Sometimes it's canned fruits, canned vegetables is always contained. Sometimes it can be things like canned pasta. It just rotates about every 6 months depending on pricing and just trying to change things up the menu to avoid kids getting bored.
So like
Is that more single servings or is that to aid the whole family?
Oh, I'm sorry, what?
Are those single servings of like the canned food or pasta, or is that also to aid the whole family?
No, it's just meant to feed the child.
Okay.
We've discussed in the past having kind of a family backpack program to bring home. But usually, just because the cost of single serve items can be much higher than trying to buy in bulk, we usually try and include just the listing of all of our canned foods within that service area that they can access those as well.
Something that I found out at Rogersville, and I'm not even a Rogersville resident, didn't go to school there. I mean, they don't owe me anything except when I worked there. So I'm not promoting the school district, but what I have found was that some of the high school clubs would do a canned food drive, if you will, or a paper drive, because paper goods and laundry soap and all those things aren't on, SNAP and things, but it was kept in the high school nurse's office, the storage area. And then what they would do is you'll find that the older kids will hoard their backpack food. And they will stretch it so that everybody, if the little brother and sister that's not in school that doesn't get one, they'll try and stretch it. And so I was there enough to start figuring out just making some assumptions, okay? And so there was this one little boy that always came in, and the first thing was, he wasn't any bigger than a minute, and he was a 10th grader, okay? Which tells me that they've never had enough food to eat, okay? And so he came in on Friday to get his stuff, and he wanted to know if he could get some extra stuff, okay? And that's fine. Nobody's ever turned away. But anyway, so I said to him, I said, hey, you know what? I said, I was just cleaning up and putting some stuff up because I get bored. And I've got full cans of green beans and corn and things like that. Would you be able to take those home and warm those up? Oh, yeah. And I said, well, here, let's just fix you up. Because in that way, because they're little, you've seen the little single servings, the little plastic, with the little peel off lid thing for that's not a lot. I mean, to take 3 of those and share it for 5 or 6. I was smart enough. Let me say this. I had the insight to make for sure, because, you can't assume that there's a microwave at home or that there's pots and pans at home, right? So even the vegetables that, even though they'd be cold, they could still eat them. I mean, they're safe to eat. But so they did have a microwave. He could, they had a can, because I said, now these don't have a pop top lid. Oh no, we've got a can opener. Kind of let him fill in the blanks so that I would know what to send. And I sent that little boy home with a whole batch of stuff. And he walked out, he said, thank you, first of all. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And that's not an expected thing, but he came by after school to pick it all up, and I had it bagged for him and stuff, so that it wouldn't. And he walked out with a grin on his face, and mom works, okay? Because, everybody's like, well, it's because parents don't remember. Mom works 3 jobs. She works 2 during the week, and then she works a weekend job. And you were talking about how people work, but they still can't, So with that being said, I just felt like even though his load was heavier in his arms, his load was a lot lighter on his shoulders, because he knew that he had enough food to feed his brothers and sisters. And I think there was 4 or 5 kids in the family. So, but it's just those kinds of things that you just kind of learn to watch for and to listen for. But the backpack program is really an awesome.
Yes.
I do really feel like that is one thing. If you want to talk about abuse, I really feel like that is one program that is not.
Yes.
That is not abused.
Yeah.
Okay, SNAP maybe used in some ways, but that program, if it goes to hungry kids, then nothing was wasted. Nothing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No, and it's totally great. Yeah, as far as programs like that, but also the SNAP program. So you'll probably often hear that it is rampant with abuse and things like that, but it's actually lower than the tax fraud rate across the entire U.S. Tax fraud rate sits at about 14%. As far as the data on food stamp fraud is roughly maybe like 4%, which is the lowest it's ever been. And most of that is just taking place with local grocers that are exchanging those funds for cash. So not places like Walmart, Prescott, or any of those big conglomerates, anything like that. It's usually taking place at very small grocery stores.
Well, I just feel that through the years, when it really first started coming out, there was really no regulation on what could be purchased and what couldn't. And so early on, maybe that was more rampant.
Right.
But then when they said, okay, you can't come in and buy a carton of cigarettes, or you can't come in and buy the alcohol that's sold in the grocery store too, you know, just certain things got eventually taken off the list when they saw that certain people that's what they were buying.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's definitely helped cause that to drop.
Yeah, the biggest thing has been that it's actually moved from food stamps to the EBT card.
Right.
It's really cleared up a lot of the
then
abuse.
people don't feel like I'm whipping out my stamp, it just looks like
Exactly.
a debit card or a credit card now.
But did you know, and because I used to have somebody come that kind of did more public relations for social services.
Mhm.
Did you know that technically you're supposed to have a picture ID when you use your EBT card? I didn't know that till Rick said it one day.
Yes,
That makes sense.
it's kind of a weird thing right now. So that was legislation that went through is because, so say for example, you've got like a family of 4. Technically anybody that's in that household should be able to purchase with the food stamp card. So that's been a recent amount of controversy lately is people have been saying we need to have photo IDs on food stamp cards. But then the counter argument to that is, okay, then pretty much anyone who is not that person on the food stamp card will not be able to use it. And if you're dealing with a large population of, maybe senior citizens or people who can't get to the grocery store, you've got a problem immediately there. So no, it's a super interesting thing.
Yeah, it's I've learned more than my students will ever learn by teaching this class, the ins and outs of things. And then you guys have you do paper products and things, right?
You mean as far as
like toilet paper, paper towels?
We do occasionally, just kind of depending on how it comes in.
Right. But that's the biggest issue, is non-food items. And where do you get those? And they're expensive.
Right.
I hate it when I go to have to make that Walmart trip or Dollar General trip and buy toilet paper and paper towels and laundry soap and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It just kills me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, those are very expensive products.
Now, I got something the other day. Did it come from Community Project of the Ozarks that there's going to be a big neighborhood? What is it?
In the Convoy of Hope.
Or maybe it's Convoy who's doing something.
Yeah, they're doing their, like, sounds like they're, I don't know if it's preschool stuff. Or
I don't know.
it's Maybe before
Do
the
you
summer
guys,
starts.
do you work in conjunction with Convoy or?
We do just like on a project by project basis.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have any big things coming up where you guys are going to be there passing out food or anything like that you can share with us?
I mean, not as far as in the community
Okay.
directly right now, besides just the agencies that
Yeah.
are passing out to food pantries right now. Yeah.
Got a question for you, on the backpack program. I assume the backpacks are cheap backpacks. Do they just pile up at the people's home? Once the kids get there, do they bring them back or?
So actually, yeah, it
Yeah,
usually,
I was curious about that.
yeah. No, that's a totally fair question. So usually, it just depends on the semester, sometimes we'll give out backpacks for the child to have.
Yeah,
And then from there, we'll just do it in a grocery sack that can then be placed in the backpack.
placed in the backpack.
Yeah, so that way we're not expending a ton of
Yeah,
cost on
I was
backpacks.
wondering about that.
Yeah.
They'd be piling up at home.
Right. Yeah, we'd be spending like half of our funds on
Right,
like purchasing
backpacks.
backpacks. Yeah. No, that's a good question though.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any other questions?
No, it's really informative.
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for
Yeah.
coming. Appreciate it.
thanks a lot. Glad you found us.
No problem. I'm gonna give plenty of crap to Jennifer.
You do, you tell her.
Yeah.
Tell her, I know why you sent her. Yeah.
She sent me right into the lion's den, didn't say a word.
Jennifer's been with Ozarks Food Harvest for quite a while.
Yes.
Like, what?
Oh, man. She's been there.
Like 15, 18 years? I mean, something
Yeah.
like that. I mean, a long time,
Yeah.
so.
That was one of my questions. What is the history of, when did you all start, basically?
If I can remember correctly, I believe we started in 1987, 88,
Okay.
just about the time I was born.
There's a smart aleck in every group.
So it just started out as part of the Council of Churches. Oh,
Yeah,
thank
yeah,
you.
forget.
Perfect.
Okay.
And then from there, it kind of transformed into Ozarks Food Harvest as a subsection of Council of Churches. We moved into the Cross Lines building where it sits now, and then eventually separated from Council of Churches to just become a Feeding America food bank. Yeah, I believe that was around 1992.